I've just seen brain health and mental performance plummet, especially in the last 5 years of my 27-year career as a physician. Just tell us what is happening with brain state health and performance, because I'm really, really concerned from the young to the old.
Yeah, yeah. So several short anecdotes, and I'll go through this quickly. So let's start with what is the challenge that I think we face globally. So I'll give you two or three data points. The first is that Dr. Daniel Amen, who's done more clinical scans, I've done functional scans, so very different. But his data, my data, as well as data from several neuroscientists around the world, we all had the same data. There weren't that many good things, Steve, that came out of COVID. But one of the good things that came out of COVID was that it forced many of us who were disparate to collaborate and share information. And so, what he found and what I found is that the average EEG, so think of the EEG as the measurement of the noise in our head, right? So the average EEG of a normal human being today, so not a clinical person, not ADHD, just a normal person, is the equivalent of a schizophrenic patient from the 1940s and 50s.
Wow.
Not in terms of symptoms,
Right.
but in terms of just the volume of activity. And that's largely been exponentially rising. The curve is a hockey stick curve. It's not a linear curve since 2010. So since 2010-ish, a few things have happened that are leading to that. So in the year 2010, Steve, there were 6 billion people in the world, and there were about 1.4 billion devices in the world. So today, in 2026, there are about 8 billion people in the world, roughly, and we have over 30 billion devices in the world. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that cognitive stimulation is now number one on us constantly. So I grew up in Southern Africa, and I don't know how old you are, I don't need to know, but I think I'm pretty older than you because you look very young. But when I grew up in Africa, we had one television in my house. We had one channel in the whole country. And on a weekday, it came on at 5 o'clock. And on a weekend, it was like at 12 o'clock.
Mm.
So compare that to like on our cell phones, in our hip pockets, we have this amazing, amazing sort of buffet of constant stimulation. So the problem with constant stimulation is not just constant and accessible stimulation. That's a problem in itself, Steve. But in my new book that I just released called, Life Explained, Chasing 10 Hertz, I give a lot of data that the biggest problem with this constant stimulation is shared microtrauma. So again, I'll use my experience in Africa. When I was growing up, um, the way that we got our global news, Steve, was through Time magazine. And typically it was a week old and it was just images. So, for example, if there was an earthquake in Turkey, for example, a week later, we got a Time magazine and we saw pictures of it. But now we have instantly shared micro traumas. So when anything bad happens to someone that we know, a friend of ours, they text us, a family member, they text us, they send us a video. We go on social media and we'll scroll through the good stuff, but just like, anything negative that is going on, we're just amplified to go, make it much bigger in our brains. So we're not designed to do that. Our brain is not designed for, number one, this much constant stimulation, and then number two, to almost consume this much negative stimulation. And I'll give you one last example and then I'll pause. If you're driving in Joburg, all right, and suddenly you see an ambulance and police, and you slow down and you slow down and you slow down and you stop and you slowly drive by a car accident, and you notice that the car accident was not good, like someone was hurt really badly, maybe even died. And then you keep driving, like at least for the next 30 minutes, your brain will be like, oh my gosh, like, it wasn't your accident. You didn't know who they were, but you witnessed something. Like you saw it with your eyes, you heard the sound, all these images the brain had to process. So that's an example of, we're finding that the secondary PTSD, these micro traumas, is really what is causing so much noise in our brain. And by the way, all of it is accessible to us from our hip pockets. So that's the real challenge. And what I tell my athletes when I work with them is that I don't know if there's ever been a time, Steve, that we can be more physically healthy. our access to nutrition, to proper protocols, the functional medicine that you were talking about, the blood work that we can do, the genome stuff that we can do, the physical, like the therapy, the workouts, the amount of information that's available for us to be physically healthy is off the charts. But it's never been harder to be mentally healthy. So we're going in one direction physically, but we're going in the opposite direction mentally. And yet the human experience, like your lived experience, my lived experience, is in our brain.